Next up, we've got the next director of the CIA, Kansas Republican Mike Pompeo. He's a former Army officer. Pompeo is set to take control of the legendary spy agency from current director John Brennan. Pompeo is a graduate of Harvard Law. He favors keeping Gitmo open. He was a prominent member of the Special House Committee that investigated the 2012 attacks in Benghazi, Libya. And joining me now, another former CIA director as well as senior Trump advisor, the revered and respected Ambassador James Woolsey. Thank you for joining us, Ambassador. What do you think of this choice, Pompeo as CIA director?
I think, from what I know, and it's an excellent one. I don't know him. I've just seen his resume and so forth. But it's a great record. He was, I think, first in his class at West Point. He's been a very, I think, distinguished congressman, and it shows a real taste for quality in the appointments process, I think, that they're using.
So Gitmo stays open, it seems. It will
be
I think
that's
expanded
great.
in use, yeah.
Yes, it's you know, it's an excellent facility, and it's been refurbished several times, and it does what it's supposed to do. And I think that otherwise you end up bringing those guys back to the United States somewhere in some federal prison, and they will probably not stay long. It'll be like trout, catch and release. Quickly,
was it ever used as a recruiting tool by ISIS or any terrorists, Gitmo?
I believe it was, but I don't know how much.
Not to the degree as it's been talked about?
I don't think so.
What are you advising President Trump about in terms of foreign policy?
Well, that's I've been transferred over to the transition side of things, so I'm not working on the foreign policy side now. I've said all along, and I think they have thought it from their own perspective too, that the most important thing to do now is to get your appointments lists clear and be able to begin to make some decisions, as they are, so you can hit the ground running January 20th.
Okay, so the biggest issues that you think the Trump White House has to tackle right off the bat, what do you think?
I think they need to set a course, because this can't be done all at once. But the Obama administration, really in terms of foreign policy, treated our friends like Israel as if they were enemies, and our enemies like Iran as if they were friends. And they went back on their promises, for example, particularly the red line in the dirt, that they would tell Assad that he could not cross that, Syria, that he could not cross that and use chemical weapons on his own people. He did. They shrugged and turned the problem over to the Russians. And U.S. credibility, particularly from those two sets of incidents, has suffered a lot in the world. We need to rebuild it. And I'm not exactly sure what steps to take, but I think that ought to go first on the agenda for foreign policy.
Okay. You know, also, we talked about this earlier. It's the worst year for terror in over a decade. The Institute for Economics and Peace warns terror attacks grew nearly eightfold in just 1 year, from 2014 to 2015. That's a massive surge. With more than 29,000 people killed in 2015, ISIS is also now in more than 28 countries, and that's a number that's more than doubled since 2013, Ambassador. What do you attribute this increase to?
Well, I think that ISIS still, in spite of the lost territory around Mosul and so forth in Syria and Iraq, I think that they still draw young people from Islam around the world with an idea of becoming part of the caliphate and becoming part of a civilization that is taking over the world as distinct from just a terrorist group. And that is attractive, and it builds up the enthusiasm, I think, for terror, and some horrible terror, killing people, burning people alive in cages, and so on. And that is something that I think is going to grow unless we both take out ISIS in its home in Syria and Iraq solidly and decisively, and begin to operate in the United States and help other states operate in sort of a counterintelligence role against ISIS and other terrorist groups in the home country. We have got to act more the way Rudy Giuliani and his colleagues did in New York after 9/11, and less as if we
What was that?
Well, they were following and staying in touch with lots of informants in lots of places. Not just
and being hyper-vigilant about getting
absolutely.
So do you think that if we did not leave in 2011 in Iraq, let me back up. If we basically dialed back on the surge in 2011, If we had stayed in Iraq, do you think ISIS would be here as it is now?
I think there's a pretty good chance they would not be as strong as they are, or they might not even be there, because we left a vacuum. And that was a very bad decision. It's like what would have happened if we had done what we did in the Korean War and then withdrawn immediately. Korea would have collapsed into something. We're not sure what. And that's what's happened in Iraq and Syria.
Ambassador, thank you so much for your time.
Great to be with you.
Have a good Thanksgiving if I don't see you.